But there's a sense of sadness as well. Because when we take a look at God's people, the Hebrews, the Israelites, they had experience in confrontation. They had that interaction with God. And yet, how can they disobey? How can they turn against Him? I'm thinking right now of Deuteronomy 17. And in Deuteronomy 17, starting in verse 14, and I won't read it all, these are the rules for a king. And God says, you want a king, here's what you need to do. This is Torah. These are His commands in Torah, His proper instruction. And He said, number one, when you enter the land to possess it, and you want to set a king, He basically says in verse 15, you must have one of your countrymen. So Solomon fit that, no problem. Number two, a little bit later on in verse 16, he's not to multiply horses for himself. Now what that means is being rich. Rich for himself. So making himself rich. Verse 17, he shall not multiply wives for himself, or else his heart will turn away. And the final one is, nor shall he greatly increase silver or gold for himself. And the final one is how he shall write a copy of this law on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priests. And what's sad for me is here's Solomon. His dad is David. He has an encounter with God to build the Beit Barakah, the Beit Midrash, the special holy house of God where God dwelt. He actually experienced, imagine this, he was here after the dedication and they experienced the Shekinah glory coming down, the presence of God coming to dwell in this place. He saw it. My sadness comes in is that he turned against God. I don't understand why. Some of you that may teach Bible school, you might say, and you're teaching your children about the Bible, and you say, what did Solomon do wrong first? And a lot of people say, well, he got involved with pagan wives. Well, that's not true. Because when you actually take a look at the Word, I was in Deuteronomy 17 looking at these laws, but you actually study 1 Kings chapter 9 and following. Queen of Sheba comes. She finds out about the wisdom of Solomon. It's an amazing story, and we see God's blessing on Solomon. And the first thing that happens, and I've got to read this, the first thing that happens when she believes, so this is in 1 Kings 10, she believes, and now in verse 14. Now remember the laws, remember the directives that God set for the king. One, it's got to be one of your own countrymen. He cannot multiply horses for himself. He should not have multiple wives. He should not have silver and gold for himself. He should not have a salary. And finally, he should write a copy of the Torah. So as soon as she believes, this gets very interesting. I'm in verse 14 in chapter 10 of 1 Kings. It says, now the weight of gold which came into Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. 666. In the Jewish culture, a kid would go, oh my goodness. Solomon was tempted by the devil because 6 is man's number. 666 is the devil's number. 6 is the number of, it's not a Christian number. Never has been a Christian number. 666 does appear in the Old Testament. The first thing he does is gets a salary. The first thing he does, he breaks Torah, turns against God's directives in the Torah, and he gets a salary of silver and gold, 666 talents. Now, was it 666 talents? I'm not sure. I think the writer of 1 Kings is basically saying, who cares about the number? Maybe it's 1,000 talents. Maybe it's 200 talents. But the writer is saying 666 talents. A lot of people will say the book of 1 Kings is a book of history. No, it's not. When you take a look at the Jewish perspective, it's a book of prophecy, which means it's talking about people's interaction with God and the Word of God for us even today. And this was the beginning of the downfall of Solomon. And we know the rest of the story from there, because from there, the downfall goes and continues for a number of years until finally all of the glory of Solomon, the Milo, his house, the walls, the beautiful temple he built was totally destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. I think there is a faith lesson for us as I'm here. I'm excited about this. I'm excited about being here. But I also know what Solomon did. I also know that Solomon turned against God, because then he had multiple wives for himself. It says that he multiplied horses for himself. And this faith lesson is strong for me. Strong for me to realize that indeed here's Solomon, picked by God himself, chosen by God himself. Even David, his dad, knew that, to build his house. And yet Solomon turned away from God himself. And all of this was totally destroyed. I think that goes for all of us to say, yes, we're living a righteous life. Yes, some of us have ministry, strong ministry, and effective ministry. But the thing is, the insidiousness of that evil inside of us, that sinful nature that's still there, can actually destroy it all. I think it's something to be in awe of, because I think the message of Solomon and the message of these ruins really is that message. That indeed we come to the Lord every day and say, oh Lord God, cleanse us, keep us strong in you. Let us not begin that slow slide where we would turn away from you. So I will say shalom to you, and I'm going to go back into the royal house and see if I can find any of other things that might be of interest. Shalom.